Character begins when we realize that, first of all, we are free to choose between the world of man and the world of God. First, we've got to recognize what areas in our life offer us those kinds of choices. Once we become conscious of that need for discrimination, we begin to develop the skill. And secondly, when we can no longer accept and sustain the mediocrity of what we are. That's a very important realization. Unfortunately, most of us don't think of ourselves as mediocre. We may have an even stronger ego drive than that, to feel that we really have accomplished enough to be satisfied with. But it's when we can suddenly become so aware of our self-centeredness that we can't stand the thought of our own self-centered thinking, that we begin to discover that there are other alternatives. We don't have to be centered on ourselves. That's a trap that we have slipped into, and that the great rewards of life come through service. Third, when we can correctly discriminate between that which man has made and God has created. In other words, being unsatisfied with ourselves and recognizing that we are free to choose, then we need to correctly discriminate, and this takes lifetimes of refinement. Fourth, when we can deliberately pursue the discipline of standing by our superior choices. Again, it's not enough to be aware of the need to change or to even make the choice toward change, but character is proven when we can stand by that choice and make it be achieved. Most of us find that we can make a resolution, take a life rule. We recognize its importance, and we have that much sense. And where we get discouraged is the fact that we have failed too many times this or that vow or life rule. And we sometimes feel we just don't want to put ourselves in the position of another failure. And maybe the best way to do that is to not to make any commitments at all, which of course is the greatest of all failures. Now these points mark the boundary between a kind of positive thinking metaphysics and a kind of self-emptying, God-feeling mysticism. In metaphysics, we are seeking those kinds of qualities that are self-enhancing, that we will have more success, more health, more influence, more friends, that we will be a better person to the end that people will look up to us and respect us. But as noble as those kinds of self-centered thoughts are, that is, it's far better than much more aggressive self-centered thoughts, it's still very much entrapped in the world. And the entrapment, of course, of metaphysics is that we never deflect ourselves from the self, from the ego in that sense. The view of Christian mysticism goes to the vital step of bridging the gap between a self-centered enchantment in the good life and a self-emptying quest for God. Quest for God cannot tolerate any of the thoughts that enhance the ego.
Good morning to each and every one of you here today in this beautiful Church of the Holy Quest here at Quest Haven. And welcome to those of you online and those of you joining us for the first time. Whenever I'm up here or sitting in the pews or enter the gates of Quest Haven, I always feel like this is a day of celebration. So I always feel like we're celebrating something special. And we've just come out of the summer solstice led by Reverend Miara Willis, and last week Reverend Hal Lingerman led us through the 4th of July celebration and ignited our fireworks in bringing us these gems from all the world's faiths. So today our celebration is just being here, just being alive today. Because every day that we have this opportunity to breathe, to be on this quest for God is such a gift. And so welcome to the celebration of life here at Quest Haven. In the video we just saw, Reverend Stephen Isaac, Dr. Stephen Isaac, reminded us of the choice that we have, our freedom of choices to find this path of the Christian mystic, of seeking God and self-emptying and being God-filled. We have an opportunity today to experience a stepping stone on that path with a talk given by Reverend Lucy Wold this morning on inner work, active imagination, where she will talk to us about how we can bring together the known and the unknown of our incredible imaginations and how we can use that on our quest for God. You know, when I hear the word imagination, I remember how impactful Albert Einstein's words were that imagination is more important than knowledge, and that goes counter to what the world views right now, and that logic will get us from point A to B, but our imagination can take us everywhere. And even Pablo Picasso said, well, it was really good what he said. He said something like, imagine what is real and then it will become real. So of course an artist would have that to say. So our imaginations are at our disposal and we can use them on this quest for God for good. And so I can't wait to hear what Lucy has to tell us this morning. So let's begin this celebration of life by standing and singing. So let's join together, stand and sing to the Lord's Prayer. There's a reason that we begin these services with those words and sing them, the Lord's Prayer. And as we were standing singing, I was reminded when I used to sing that as a child and not knowing the difference between what is real and what is imagined. So as we know as children, our imagination creates our reality. So there's something about singing those words that brings those words to a reality. And that is what artists bring for us. They take the blank canvas, like Picasso, and they create a reality out of their imagination. So in a sense, we do that with our own lives as well. So we're going to attune more deeply, and we'll move into our invocation. And I'd like to quote words from Prayers of a Mystic from our founder, Flower A. Newhouse. And I loved her definition of Christian mysticism, which is the soul's endeavor to know God. And that's the quest that we're all on, isn't it? That's why we're here. So let's close our eyes now and find comfort here in this Church of the Holy Quest, our home, and wherever we are, feel that we are home. And as Flower says, "O holy light, let us meet our days consciously and helpfully. Let us be inspired by the realization of all that is real around us and in us. In and through the way and the love of the Lord Christ, who leads us to thee. Let us grow to know thee deeply." Amen. So now as we breathe deeply, in and out, slowly savoring those words. And we give deepest thanks to you, Mother, Father God, of all creation, of all life here on this planet Earth. And we are so grateful for the living presence of Christ, who is here with us, around us and within us in every moment. And thank you for sending the Holy Spirit to comfort us in times of doubt. We breathe in the truth of your love. We breathe out any remnants of self-doubt we carry. We breathe in the light of your Spirit so that it may shine through us in every cell of all of our bodies. And breathe out any fear, insecurity, or negativity that is no longer part of our reality. We welcome in your healing rays today as we celebrate your presence here in these holy grounds and with the presence of you that we carry no matter where we walk, and make that ground holy. We breathe in this reality and breathe out everything but that reality of you. We ask that you bless those around the world, wherever they may be, that they may also open up to this powerful stream of love and compassion that you bring to each one of us, no matter where we are in our lives, because we know you are everywhere. We ask that you bless our speaker this morning so that she is a radiant beam of your light, and through your light and your wisdom and your truth, she is able to share with us in the revelations and insights she has gained in preparing this talk for us. We give thanks to you, O God, O Christ, for every moment of this life that we have the opportunity to share your love and your light with every person and creature we meet along our way. In your name, in continual remembrance and eternal reverence, we give thanks. Amen. We will now hear from the Quest Haven Voice Choir, who will be singing Idol of Praise by Craig Courtney, followed by the talk of Lucy Wold.
This is my Father's word, and to my listening ears all nature sings, and round me rings the music of the spheres. This is my Father's word, I rest me in the thought of rocks and trees, of skies and seas, his hand the wonders wrought. This is my Father's word. 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 My Father's word. The birds carols praise, morning light, lily white, their Maker's praise. This is my Father's word. He shines in all that's fair in the grass. Hear him pass, hear him everywhere. This is my Father's word. 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 Oh, let me not forget that though the wrong seems oft so strong, God is the ruler yet. This is my Father's word. The battle is not done. Jesus who died shall be satisfied, and earth and heaven be one.
Imagination. I think we all learn how to imagine as children. It's an innate part of us. Our imagination has been referred to as a powerful brain booster because it takes us to places we don't ordinarily think about. And over the years, our brains have collected a whole library of stories and scenes, and we can bring those together in our imagination. Now, most of the imagination that we think of is called passive imagination. We create ideas and pictures from our mind, as the little boy did in the picture on the title page. Another way, not so helpful, that we use imagination is when we worry. We produce all kinds of negative feelings that go around and around in our head. We dwell on our difficulties and the troubles we might have. This, instead of helping us, actually it hurts us and just makes us anxious. Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung, in 1913, came up with a way of imagination that he found could often calm him down and help improve his life. In doing this, he brought together, as Deborah mentioned, the conscious part of himself and the unconscious part. As you may remember, the conscious part that we take into ourselves are those that we think are appropriate and acceptable to society, where we want to fit in. But what we don't like very much about ourselves, we put into our unconscious part, and we don't have access to that. So these two don't talk to each other. But inviting them to communicate with each other, Jung found that he could receive help for his life. So today, we'll look at this different kind of imagination of Dr. Jung's called active imagination. As I've read about his life, I think Jung was deeply intuitive and mystical and often experimented, it seemed to me, on himself to develop how to do things. The earliest recording experience of active imagination done by him is a visionary experience he had in 1913. And he tells about it in his biography, Memories, Dreams, Reflections. World War I was about to break out in August 1st, 1914. So people in 1913 were just in turmoil. Everything was up in the air. They didn't know what was going to happen, and it wasn't a pleasant time to be alive. Jung felt compelled, he said, to find out the extent of his own experience and how it matched what he was seeing in the world around him. He found himself in a state of great tension, and so he started writing down the fantasies that came to him. And I want to quote him. He said, "I had an unswerving conviction that I was obeying a higher will, and that feeling upheld me until I had mastered the task." So he allowed these images from his fantasies to come up, and he realized this was helpful. Another quote, "I learned how helpful it can be to find the images that lie beneath the emotions." When he became fearful and wanted to stop doing this, he realized that doing this process might be helpful to his patients, and he was not willing to subject his patients to anything that he was not willing to do himself, so he kept at it. And he goes into a lot of detail in his book, but I just want to tell you about this first one, what he called a dream fantasy that represents what the Germans wanted to do in World War I. They wanted to impose their will and have their own way by starting this war. And it came to him very clearly that this attitude of the Germans was not right, that there are higher things than the ego's will. A figure came up in his imagination that represented that German way, and he realized that figure would have to be destroyed. In this imagination of his, in which that being was destroyed, no words were spoken. Yet he said there was a profound interaction between his conscious mind and the images that came up from the unconscious. This personal experience of his demonstrated to Jung that he could actually go into his imagination and then have a conversation between the two parts of himself. So because he was willing to try this, he opened up this possibility not only to his patients, but to all of us too. In active imagination, we attempt to bridge these two parts of ourselves. And the idea is that by doing this, we may be able to they may be in conflict, and we may be able to come to a compromise between the two, come to some kind of agreement that improves our lives. Now, my original plan for this talk was to focus on this Jungian approach to active imagination, but what life often does when we plan a talk here at Quest Haven is give us an unexpected curve and offer something to us that begs to be included, and that's what happened to me. I was shown not only the Jungian form, but a deeper form of active imagination that I knew the talk would not be complete without. So I'm including that, and then as I was doing that, I realized that there was another process that we've been doing at our retreats that I would call active imagination. So rather than this talk focusing only on one type of active imagination, I'm branching out. But I first turned to the work of Jungian analyst Robert Johnson. And you've heard about him before here. He had a psychotherapy practice in San Diego for many years. He passed in 2018 at the age of 97. The book I used for this talk was Inner Work, Using Dreams and Active Imagination for Personal Growth. And he begins with a note of caution to all of us, if you want to try active imagination, because he found that some people go into their imagination and are unable to return to reality. They have a great deal of trouble. Their minds get lost in the realm of fantasy, and they just can't find their way back. So before anybody tries it, he tells us to be sure and have someone available to us to help bring us back to reality if we can't shut our imagination down. But those of us who are safely able to work with active imagination and attempt to enter into a dialogue with different parts of ourselves, the unconscious and the conscious, what we need to do is specifically set aside a private time all by ourselves to go into our imagination. It's said to be somewhat similar to dreaming, only as you know, dreams take place in the unconscious while you're fully awake and conscious when you're doing active imagination. Our chairperson, Dr. Deborah Waitley, will be speaking about working with dreams on July 30th, so we'll be hearing more about dreams soon. And some of us may be startled to discover that the answers that come to us from the unconscious may express radically different views than those in our conscious minds. We may say things, they may say things that we never thought of before. But it's important to realize that these images that appear are in fact symbols representing the deep interior parts of our unconscious. They have a mind of their own. They say and do things new to us. And that could be startling, could be enlightening, could be scary. So remember, these two parts that have been unattached to each other, not able to speak to each other, are now coming to the forefront to talk. So in this, we actually create a fantasy in our minds that's experienced consciously as we draw these parts of our unconscious up. Our minds carry on an imaginary conversation or visualization that comes up as a result of our imagination. The two parts may walk together in your imagination, talk together, confront each other, argue with each other, fight, or even become friends. We don't know ahead of time. Johnson gives an example of this that I found really helpful. He goes into detail about it, and it kind of gives you an impression of what one person did. So I'd like to tell you about that. There's a woman I'll call Stephanie. That she'd worked herself into a state of exhaustion after becoming obsessed with repainting the inside of her house. Here, she was only repainting the inside of her house, but it just took her over. Images of color combinations, fabrics, furniture, all these things went through her mind over and over. Color design, texture, balance. She was kept awake all night by these things. So she wanted to find out who inside of her was causing this, who was obsessed with these things. And she wanted dialogue with that part of herself to try to stop this obsession so she could get some sleep and stop being so irritable. So she found a quiet time alone and got out her paper to record. And I will tell you a little later how important it is to record what happens during these sessions, because it keeps you on track, plus you'll want to be able to remember it later. She asked her unconscious several questions. Where is this obsession? Who is obsessed? Where does this feeling come from? And who is this one inside of me who feels this way? Then she waited patiently, and I think this must be the hardest part, to wait patiently for an image to come up. The image that was revealed to her had on an orange Zen Buddhist robe. So she came to call this image the Japanese artist within her. She entered into a dialogue with that energy to find out who it was and what it wanted, and she wrote down the dialogue. The artist seemed to be thrilled with colors and had pretty much taken over Stephanie's life, but she didn't want to lose this part of her because it seemed highly sensitive and kind of intriguing. So she told the artist, please don't retreat. I'm not angry. We can have an agreement so we can both thrive. The artist, why are you pushing? And she asked the artist, why are you pushing me so hard? And the artist said, I'm afraid. And Stephanie asked, afraid of what? I'm afraid I'll be locked up again. I can hardly ever express myself. I feel I've been starving. This may be my only opportunity. Stephanie says, but it doesn't have to be this way. If I provide other vehicles for you to express yourself, then would you feel that desperate? And the artist asked, do you know what that implies? Stephanie said, I'm apprehensive about what I'm getting myself into. I've always let my practicality get in the way of my artistic expression. The pure joy of creating, I don't allow myself to have that. I'm always trying to be productive. I must sort through the values connected with artistic expression in the physical world to make a place for you. What would you suggest? So the artist says, ceramics, watercolors, plant flowers, and do a garden, arrange the flowers. I just want us to work and play with form and color and aspects of the physical world. Call to me, and I will come to you. Stephanie said, I realized I had to deal with this part of me on its terms and do what it needed me to do within reason. She realized that the culture she was living in is interested mainly in productivity and gives no value to being as opposed to doing. It gives no value to beauty that does not have a useful purpose. A new world began to open to Stephanie, and she started talking with the inner artist frequently. She took a ceramics class. She worked in her garden and did other artistic things, bringing her a sense of beauty and connecting her to the earth. She said she realizes she's nourishing that part of her that was starving before, the starving artist within her, and she was helped by this her own willingness to listen to this part of herself from her unconscious, let it have its say, and learn from it. She knew, too, that if this artist had suggested something outrageous or something that Stephanie was not comfortable with, she would have said no. She would have declined. And that's her right. Now, it's important, if anyone decides to try active imagination, to have a series of steps and procedures to follow to get past the confusion, or to be sure you get everything done. So you decide how you will record, and here's some choices. Jung wrote by longhand, and that's always an option. Johnson typed. He used the lowercase to type what he said, and the uppercase to type what the imaginative being said. Today, with computers, we can change our fonts, we can change our colors, we can record in all different ways. You could record a conversation, that conversation, in voice memos on your iPhone. Some people use others than writing to express what happened. They dance, play music, draw, paint, sculpt, speaking out loud. Johnson writes about a woman who just was really into dance, and she just did all this dance all around the room. She was all over the place, being mean and angry and then happy. And when she was over, she said, "You can come out now, Robert." He was hiding behind the sofa because he was so overcome by what she was doing. In any case, if you do this, wherever you work, there should be no phones, no doorbells, no texts coming in. You need to just let out your feelings without worrying that anyone else is going to see it or be there to hear you. Write down the flow of your unconscious without worrying about proper grammar or even if it makes sense. You can read it all later, but no one will see this writing but you. And remember, to be active, you can't just be passive. You have to participate in the drama with your own feelings and emotions, because you have to be interacting as intensely as if there were really another person in the room with you and you were having a conversation with them. So people might ask, how do I know I'm just not making this up? How can I talk to someone who's only a figment of my imagination? But Johnson feels that it's nearly impossible to produce anything in our imagination that is not somewhat an authentic representation of something in our unconscious. So maybe the question becomes, what do I do with these images? I feel like I'm just talking to myself. And that's the whole point. You are talking to yourself. You're talking to another part of yourself. So they offer 4 steps in the approach to active imagination. Invite the unconscious to respond, to come up to the surface and make contact with you, and then wait and see what happens or who comes. Dialogue with it and exchange points of view. Who are you? What do you want to talk about? Ask questions. Add the ethical element of values, and this means that we in our conscious minds have values, have human values, whereas our unconscious is kind of amoral and primitive. It doesn't know the values that we have, so you have to keep that on track. And then make it concrete with a physical ritual. Never act out externally. This is all in your imagination. And affirm the message of the active imagination with a physical act. Don't talk about it with others. That contaminates it. Remember the physical act that Stephanie did. She took a ceramic course, she worked in her garden, she did artistic things. So this helps, I think, kind of cement the conversation and what you've talked about. Now, sometimes no one comes. And if that happens, you have to be very patient, and you may have to prime the pump. You may choose an image from your fantasy, as Jung did, and start a dialogue. If you have a special place to go to, you might go to that place in your imagination and then see who shows up. Ask, who is the one inside of me who is so depressed, so anxious, so worried, whatever you are dealing with at the time? Then if you've had a dream recently and there were images that you remember from your dream, you might start dialoguing with one of those images. Do not try to manage the conversation. You're not in charge. This is a conversation equally between the two of you, and you accept what comes. They say that expressing your feelings invites this inner being to express their feelings too. Honor and listen to the voice without dominating, and do not ever give up your human values, and do not ever take your anger out on anyone else. Now, Johnson goes ahead in the book Inner Work, Dreams and Active Imagination, to write about more examples and different ways. But when I realized there was another way to use active imagination that takes us into the higher worlds, a way that Flower brought through her teachings, I realized it was important to talk about that too. This other form of imagination includes not only the conscious and the unconscious, but also the superconscious. That has access to the inner worlds, to God, to infinity. Dr. Stephen Isaac wrote about this kind of active imagination in his academy lessons created before the internet. And I thought it might be interesting to some of you who were not here at that time. Stephen's lessons were put out in a booklet like this, in hard copies, not in the internet, and it was called The Way of Discipleship to Christ. And all the lessons were in 3 different volumes of this, and people worked very hard to do the lessons. And we all got so much out of it. Not all of us finished, and I'm one of the non-finishers, but they were an amazing thing. And then today, those of you who are blessed to be in the academy know what Blake has done with it, and the pictures and the images and all the things that the internet brings and that he is able to put together. So between the two, we have a rich volumes of richness of Flowers' teachings. Stephen tells us that the art of communicating with the unconscious, which the indigenous people have always done, is a lost art because we modern people have just gone to being very rational. We have a rational perspective, and we kind of throw that out with the bathwater. We just have not focused on the unconscious. And then Stephen explains also that Jung, as an empirical scientist, did not discuss concepts or principles that were not part of his life. He just brought out what he did in his life. So he didn't bring any religious beliefs. He didn't enter into the realm of God or Christ or anything that the inner worlds. He was strictly in what had happened in his own life. He considered those beyond the range of his psychology. I had never heard this before, but it helped me to read Stephen's explanation that psychology, the purpose, the value, is to connect our present with our past, while the spiritual is to connect our present with our future. Thus, the spiritual helps us move ahead spiritually and grow more. So it has such great value. In the olden days, Stephen would give a talk one week and Flower would give a talk the next week, and we had the best of both worlds. It was wonderful. So I'd like to tell you a little bit about Stephen. He was an extraordinary teacher, counselor, writer, mentor, and friend to so many of us at Quest Haven. He met Flower when he was 10 and maintained a lifelong interest in Christian mysticism, Quest Haven Retreat, and the Reverend Flower A. Newhouse. Everyone who studies Flower's works benefits from Stephen's deep devotion. He was such a part of our community here. He contributed so much. And we all benefit from that. And this was in addition to his regular psychology job and working with things and writing books that are still in use today. So what an amazing soul Stephen is. In his academy lessons, the ones I just showed you, he wrote not only about the psychological approach to active imagination that we've been talking about, but the spiritual approach. The spiritual approach to active imagination. He said, we come to centeredness through prayer, meditation, contemplation, and remembrance. Using Flower's alignment technique or another technique that you like to bring you into the higher realms, we open the gateway to the divine. In a state of holy expectancy and creative receptivity, we come to the loftier ranges of consciousness. And in our imagination, we survey how the inner world might look to us. Can you kind of imagine what the inner world might look to you? We imagine the presence of our soul there. Then we engage in conversation and tap into the wisdom of our soul and establish an ongoing relationship. We might at another time tap into a relationship with one of the angelic orders, such as your guardian angel or the angels who work with the Holy Spirit, or another higher being that you might wish to contact. As I was putting this talk together, I realized that since Stephen's passing, we've adopted a way of what I call active imagination, contacting our soul and being in touch with the angels, in a process we have used at many of our retreats. Officially named proprioceptive writing, we've come to name this project soul writing, and many people have found it really helpful to do this kind of writing. The word proprioceptive, from the Latin proprius, means one's own. Just as our five senses take in information about the outer world, our little-known sixth sense of proprioception gathers and processes information from the inner world of our bodies that we alone inhabit. And here we've come to call this soul writing, and many of you have already done this. This book actually suggests that you do it every day, and that helps you to really, really get to know yourself. The instructions we give for this in our retreats: listen to Baroque music with its slower tempo that resembles 60 beats of our resting heart rate. Create your own sacred space by lighting a small votive candle from a larger candle. Close your eyes and cup your hands over them gently, and take several long, deep breaths and tune into your soul. Become the listening presence as your soul whispers its impressions to you. And then give voice to those valuable impressions by what you put on your paper. I think all of these active imaginations and our passive imagination make our lives so rich. And so now you get to choose what kind of imagination you are going to play out in your life. I look out at some of you who are so creative and wonder where you're going to go with this. Thank you.
In the midst of my confusion, in the time of desperate need, when I'm thinking not too clearly, a gentle voice does intercede. Slow everything about me comes the gentle voice, so still, so pure. Slow down, be still, my child, be still and wait on the Spirit of the Lord. Slow down and hear His voice and know that He is and know that He is
What a beautiful song, wasn't it? Now's the time we give gratitude, and I'll start with special thanks to Reverend Lucy Wold for that talk. Lucy, thank you so much. That was not an easy subject to bring to us, and for you to be able to so eloquently bring in the teachings here at Quest Haven of Flower A. Newhouse and Stephen Isaac, along with Carl Jung and Robert Johnson. And I know what I got out of it is the concept that it's not just active imagination that can bring us to the spiritual or deeper spirituality, but it's the spiritual approach that we learn here and follow here that can help us access even deeper realms of our imagination and do so actively. So thank you. So special thanks to each and every one of you here and who's online, those of you that help in any way that you feel called to help create what we have here and make it possible. So what is here at Quest Haven was once in the imagination only of its co-founders, Flower A. Newhouse and Lawrence Newhouse, and now look at the reality that came out of their imagination that they answered the call to create for all of us here and future generations. So thank you to all of you who help make this possible, who do your work, your physical labor, your financial donations and tithings, and now you can go on the internet. You don't even need to be here, although I would encourage each and every one of you to be here as much as you can to enjoy what these grounds offer. But online, we have a way that you can join the community and be part of it and continue to donate and learn more about these teachings and dive deeper at the same time. In the receptacle out in the narthex, we have a place where you can leave any donations as well, if you so feel called. So upcoming announcements, next Sunday, July 16th, we have Reverend Dan Willis speaking to us on the art of the spiritual to manifest healing. Also, mark your calendars for a 60s style costume party, Saturday, July 22nd. It'll be at 5:30 at Quest Haven's Friendship House, and flyers are on the table back in the narthex. So this will take some courage and humility, because don't be afraid when it says costume party. So just come dressed and ready to celebrate the 60s, whether you're in your 60s or you remember that decade, the good parts of it. So we hope to see you there. Also, please join us for friendship and fellowship at the Friendship House immediately following today's service, so for some refreshments. And thank you all so much for being here and being present. And now, Reverend Lucy Wold will deliver the closing prayer and benediction.
Thank you so much, Deborah, for your sharing for us today. It was beautiful. Lord Emmanuel, we ask that we might be helped to use our minds in ways that improve our character and raise our consciousness upward. Help us each day to learn more about the inner worlds, the higher worlds, the angels, those of us who are on earth can benefit by knowing more and more about what the world is really like, rather than what we see as a rather difficult reality right now, because it is not our reality. Our reality is what we know from the inner planes, what we know from the higher worlds, how we can grow and learn and be with you, Lord Christ. We ask that your teachings go out around the world, and whether people are Christian or any other religion, we know that you are helping all of us, guiding us, taking us in a direction that uplifts us. How grateful we are. Help us to use our imagination in ways that serves not only us, but the world. Help us to share with each other how we can use our minds, our imaginations, our way of thinking to bring us past the difficulties in life today. We ask your blessing on all who are ailing in any way. Guide them, help them, uplift them. Be with each of us in our journey through this earth life as we make our way Godward. We ask these things in thy holy name, Lord Christ. Amen. I wish you well on your journey through your imagination in the days ahead. May you use it peacefully and usefully to improve your life, grow your character, and improve your consciousness. Amen.